Okay, so we live, we are live. All right, thank you for joining in, family. Let me mute this. I'm gonna wait for some people to join in. This is an open forum discussion based on the Crows on the Strawman lecture that I presented, part 1 and part 2. And for people that's joining in, if you want to get in on this Hangouts, let me know. All right, let's see. Let me see who's still up. If anybody in the chat, if y'all want to get in, let me know. I can't bring everybody in, but I'll select a few people to bring into the chat. All right, so let's see. All right, y'all can share this link as well. It's gonna be like an hour-long discussion. It's not gonna be, hopefully it's not gonna be too long, but it depends on how good it is and how long y'all willing to stay up. All right. So, peace, Ayash, Hawad, Kimo, Ben Yisrael, Tina W. Shalom, shalom to y'all. If anybody else is watching, if you want to jump into this Google Hangout session, let me know. If you have any questions you want to ask me as it pertains to the scholarship that I presented, or just maybe anything in general. I feel a little lenient today, so I'll probably touch on a few things. I don't want to get too deep because I'm a little tired, but I'll definitely address some things. Trying to see who else I can invite on here. Do any of y'all in the chat, do y'all want to get on the Google Hangouts? If so, let me know. Let me know if you want to join in. Let's see. Let me see. All right. All right, family, just give me a moment. I'm just trying to get some people on this panel. Brother said, yeah, I'll join. I haven't finished watching the video, but I did watch the Jabari debate. Cool. All right, it shall be what it shall be. You want to join? All right, so we'll send you the link. Are you on Facebook? Let me know if you're on Facebook. I'll send you the link on Facebook. So I could put it in the chat, but let me see. Hold on. I could probably put it in the chat. Let's see. All right, let's see. I do. How does it work? All right, Nabia, I'm gonna add you. I'll send you the link on Facebook because we Facebook friends. So I'm gonna hit you up. Hold on. I'm gonna send you the link so you can get in. Let's see. Jonathan E. Greer, how do I join? I watched last part. Okay, I think he wants to get on. I'm gonna message him the link so he can get on. There you go. And now let me go to Nabia. Okay, so she got the link. All right, y'all click on the link and join in. All right, who else is there? Let me see. All right, Gideon Yarden. Okay, let me find you. Gideon Yarden Yisrael. Oh yeah, I know who this is. All right, I'm gonna send it to you. There you go. Okay. All right, so I sent it out, so some people should be jumping on. Truth Talk with Shawnee. What we on? I'm late to the show. Keontae Gates, this is just an open forum discussion based on the Crows on the Strawman PowerPoint that I presented, part 1 and part 2, as well as just open discussion in regards to our community and defending our community against those who are in opposition to it, right? So we're just going to speak about experiences, some tactics that we use, methodology, scholarship, because the more concrete that our heritage is, the better, more confident that we are in presenting it to people who don't subscribe to it, okay? So, True Talk with Shawnee. Email me. I'm gonna send it to email. So True Talk with Shawnee, email me there and I'll send you the link. Yes, just email me real quick, talk Truth with Shawnee, email me and I'll send you the link. Yeah, I sent it to you, Gideon, and I sent it to you, Navia. Where y'all at? Where y'all at? I'm waiting on y'all. Where y'all at? All right, make sure y'all share this video to get more people in. I had almost 100 people in the previous lecture, and I know a lot of them wanted to jump on here. This is a way for them to interface with me. So I'll have the link. So click on it if y'all want to join. Come on, family, where y'all at? All right, let me do this then. I don't know if y'all really are trying to get on. Let's see. Okay, got somebody in here. Who's that? Who's that here?
Me, Jonathan.
Who?
Jonathan.
Jonathan?
Yes, sir.
Peace, King.
Shalom. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. Shalom, shalom. All right. And let me see. All right. We're just waiting for a few more people to jump on. Let me send this just in case he's up. And okay. All right. Let's see. All right. Well, while we're waiting for other people to join in, do you want to give any input, feedback? You want to say anything?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Like, I looked at one of your other teachings as well. My question: what translation do you use?
You said, what translation do I use?
Like for the Bible, like that's what I was looking at. I looked at your one is all sin equal. I looked at that when I looked at the latter part of this one, and I was just wondering what translation do you use?
Yeah, so it varies. In regards to, hold on, let me see. Give me 1 second. Hold on.
Hey, can you hear me, bro?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, cool. Just check my mic.
All right, I had to walk away for a second. All right, there we go. All right. So you said what translation are you? So it varies. So I'm gonna show you this. Let me show you this real quick. So my level of studying is a little. Sometimes it can be a bit involved. So if depending upon where a person is at, is what I will suggest to them. So sometimes I use a formal equivalency translation, and sometimes I use a dynamic equivalency translation to contrast and compare but then I also go into the original languages as well. So my go-to as far as a formal equivalency, so the purpose behind a formal equivalency translation is that the translators were trying to translate as much as they can slavishly, word for word, from the original language to their language. Dynamic equivalency means that the objective of the translators was to translate as best they can, thought for thought, from the original language to the modern language. So that's why a lot of dynamic translations tend to read more smoothly than slavish translation, like let's say King James or something like that. So what I use in regards to translations, I use the JPS, which is more of a formal equivalency. I use the New King James, the New American Standard Bible. Those are the three that I mainly use. But then I also balance that out, sometimes looking at the NIV and NLT, which are what's called a dynamic equivalency, which does more thought for thought. But then what I do more intricately is I deal with interlinear Bibles. And this is what I suggest to people who really want to entrench themselves in the language, as well as getting the best translation is an interlinear Bible, because it will directly translate the original words as best as it can. And by reading it the way it's directly translated from the original language, puts you back into the mindset of how that particular group of people see the text or read the text. So there's several interlinear Bibles that you can get. I actually have them listed in my my group on Facebook, but I'm gonna give it to you right now. I'm gonna give you these suggestions so you can see. But in the interim, you can go to BibleHub.com, and you can type in a passage, and you can click the INT if you're using a phone, or interlinear option at the top, and it'll bring you to the interlinear translation, and that'll really give you a very great way to study. All right.
Okay.
So the books that I'll suggest to you that I have here, let me just go to my photos. You can use the interlinear Humash, right? It's the Schottenstein version or Schottenstein edition, right? And that's one of the best Pentateuch or Torah interlinears that you can get, from my opinion. You can also use the ESV if you want to dive into the Brit Hadashah New Testament, the English Greek reverse interlinear New Testament, and you can also get that from Amazon as well. That's by John Swant, who's the general editor, and C.J. Collins, who's the text editor. That's also based on the Nestle Aland Novum Testamentum Grace 27th Revised Edition. When you do textual criticism, you know exactly what those manuscripts are. A lot of those were brought out by some translators of some more formal, some more dynamic equivalency translations. But what I prefer is the Hebrew English Interlinear ESV Old Testament by the Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia. And that's a great interlinear book. And the last one I would say is the Aramaic Peshitta New Testament. There's 3 volumes. Get all 3 volumes. So if you want the best Bibles, in my opinion, it's using an interlinear, because it gives you the original language as well as the direct corresponding translated word for that language within the actual Bible itself. So those are my suggestions. But if that may be too much for some people, then you can use the 4 translations that I recommended to you, the JPS, the New American Standard, the NKJV, as formal equivalency, and dynamic to kind of balance it out, NIV, NLT, and compare and contrast them. For those who are still getting into the language, you can still use the Strong's Concordance, which is a rudimentary way of introducing somebody to the language. But as you grow, you want to deal with lexicons, right? Lexicons will make you more astute at finding the etymon of words, learning the syntax of words. Then you want to look at orthography, which is the way it's spelled or written. And then you want to look at morphology, the way various words and prepositions and things like that interface with one another, and how it breathes life into actually reading the text to see what is actually conveying to the audience. So those are just some suggestions, and you can go back and check those out, and hopefully that helps answer your question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. No problem. Also, you can email me at kingdomharbinger@gmail.com, and I'll send everything I said to you. I'll send you the links to everything I said to you.
All right.
All right. All right. So it looks like some other people are trying to get in and having difficulty.
Nice.
Kimo said, what's my Facebook group is called Kingdom Harbinger Ministries Mekar study group. So you could jump in on that. The Ethiopic Ge'ez is the Holy Grail for Understanding Hebrew. Yes, it's very good. I actually showed that in one of my videos that I did on the scholarship recap. I brought out my Ge'ez Ethiopic Bible, which I also definitely use, and that's a Semitic language, so it makes it very relatable to the original Hebrew as well. I need the direct link. I sent it. Let me send it again. Hold on.
Yo, what up, Divine? Yo, we addressing the Strawmans from the other day at the sit down.
Yeah, so I definitely wanted you on here because I really appreciate, I'll put this on record. I appreciate Alvin's perspective. He is very objective. Even though he has a cultural subscription like me, he approaches it from a very objective stance. And he's very good at debating and pointing out logical fallacies and stuff like that, type of stuff that I do. So I know he gives a very keen eye in examining a dialogue, a discussion, or debate, and being able to extract from it from an objective perspective on what he viewed occurred. You know what I mean? And when I seen him in the what group chat was that we was in on Facebook? Facebook.
Being Hebrew verse commit Amarah squad.
Yeah, when people were saying that, oh, Jabari won, I'm like, how did Jabari win? First of all, the bottom line was giving a solution, which Jabari never gave. And
what?
Yeah.
I think what it is this, man. It's like what Benny Siegel said, the peanut gallery, right?
Yeah.
Where you have some people actually looking and observing and really trying to see what both people are saying and trying to make sense of it. And the people who are just blindly going to go with whatever side they already initially picked to win. So there's really no debate. If Jabari said Kemet was inhabited by pink elephants, they just would be like, okay, yes, that's what it is. And my main thing is this, and what I saw in that debate, I don't know if we're going into this too early, but this is just one point. I noticed that when you try to have a scholarly discussion with people about the Bible, you're like, okay, let's stick with the scholarship, right? And you're coming at it, you're using arguments that an atheist could use. Like, as an atheist, you could say this, and that. These aren't faith-based arguments, right? So once you do that, they often like to throw out the red herrings and say, well, do you believe that Moses actually split a Red Sea? But you believe that, it's like, but hold on, I thought we were talking about archaeology and stuff. Like, what does that have to do? This is like, yo, you're hiding something. I'm like, no, I'm not hiding anything. And I see that that's what they were doing. Well, at least that was seeing Jabari was doing. It's like, okay, let's stick to this topic. So, for instance, when y'all was talking about Noah, and you were trying to bring up some kind of geography about glaciers or whatever, right? And you were saying, hey, is this derived from this? Exactly. He couldn't look into that. He had to keep it with the biblical narrative, And now, to be fair, though, and I don't know if this is on the topic, biblical inerrancy is rather a recent idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you look at the fundamentalist movement in the early 20th century, mm-hmm. that proclaims absolutely everything to be literal no matter what. And then there was something that happened. I was just looking at, there was something that happened in 1978 mm-hmm. in Chicago, actually, where it was like the National Chicago inerrancy statement,
Mm.
where you had all these preachers coming together proclaiming that everything should be taken literal with no wiggle room whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like a mini Council of Nicaea in 1978.
Yeah.
And they have a decree and everything.
That's crazy.
So what happens is that usually when you run into some people, usually like atheist types, right? Like the white atheist types,
Mm-hmm.
they'll say that, well, the reason why believers are trying to make everything metaphor and stuff like that now is because science is like taking the clothes off and you can't hide, so you have to. But really, it's the quite opposite. The older you go back, it wasn't as strict in the literal sense. And I think that when you do that, it kind of when you bring up that point, it kind of throws off the regular talking points
Mm-hmm.
that one would use against a quote unquote believer.
Exactly.
And what happens? They end up continuing attacking the straw man.
It's a quote unquote believer.
Exactly.
Oh wow, that's me again.
Somebody mute that mic.
Continuing attacking the straw.
Okay, I got it. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, that's all I'll say. That's at least what I observed from it. And I think, and of all people, I mean, Shaka Utmost looked like scholars extraordinaire. Because at the, you know, like I was way more interested in your and Shaka Utmost dialogue than I was in your and Jabari's dialogue. Because it looked like that was like somewhat of a build as opposed to somebody is just here to try to prove somebody wrong.
Exactly. And that's the feedback I got with a lot of people. They were talking about, oh man, it looked like Shaka. Because if you can see, one of the videos will show some of the pre and post debate. You know, Shaka's over here giving me dabs and all of that. So yeah, this is my boy, blah, blah, blah. He's saying all of that. But in the video he did with Jabari, he was making all of these assumptions about me because he didn't know me. He didn't know my work.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He got to know me and I started revealing stuff to him. He saw what I knew about Egypt. He saw what I knew about, you know, our own culture. He was like, damn, yo, I could really build with you. He even asked me for my information so we could stay in touch. And I was like,
look, and I think, okay. I really think it, I think people got Shaka wrong, right? Yeah. I think this is what happens, okay? I think he gets personally attacked a lot.
Yeah. And
sometimes that may corrupt his scholarship sometimes.
Yeah.
So see, Shaka is at his best when he's not in defense mode and just trying to make something in order to retaliate something. Exactly. When it's just a simple setting of, okay, here's what this scholar said, this is what this scholar said, blah, 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 blah. When it's in that setting, most of the time he be on point. It's only when it goes into the, I'm going to destroy the Moors or I'm going to destroy the, like when he gets into that mode.
But you know who promotes that, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So being that that's the case, that's why he goes in that direction a lot, you know, because otherwise he's cool just to sit and talk. I'm not going to say I'll hang out with the brother like that, but I'm just saying like having those type of discussions, you know what I'm saying, we can have because he's willing to learn and to share what he knows. And he is willing to admit what he doesn't know. Like if you look at those videos where I was going into the philological record to look at cognates to be able to substantiate what Israel was and what it related to, he's not a linguist, so he doesn't know the specifics of what I was talking about, but he was able to follow the discussion. And even when I brought up these various models, he was like, man, yeah, I didn't know about that. So wait, let me hear about that. He didn't know about it. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, damn, you did a whole debate and you didn't even examine this element of it. But go ahead.
Right. Now this is what I will respect about Shaka. He doesn't claim to be a PhD. Listen, when I look
dropout, right?
Say what you say?
The high school dropout.
Exactly, and he'll say that, and I'll respect him saying that. But what I've noticed is that I'll see a lot of these guys sit up on the couch saying they have all this education, but then they don't even be understanding little stuff. I'm like, so you're a PhD and you're telling me Israel isn't before the 7th century. Like, how, you know, like, that's why I'm like, okay, so we'll have to go back and research. See, I think what it is I think they'll have PhDs in other fields, but it won't be in the field of, you know, archaeology or biblical studies or Egyptology. So it would be like a PhD in something else. Because when the brother said that there was no Israel prior to the 7th century, what did he say? He said the 7th century?
At the 8th century, there was no Israel.
Yeah, the 8th. Yeah, before the 8th century, there was no Israel. When you have contemporaneous artifacts mentioning it prior to that. Oh, wait, no, he does this thing where the people exist, but not the kingdom. He'll do that card.
Like that is not related. The text even tells you that, right? So it's explicit in the text to tell you that they was not a kingdom until they had their first king.
Right, about the 11th century, 10th century.
Exactly. Before that, they were just the people, and they were people that was amongst the Canaanites.
Right.
So there's no argument there, but you know he wants to make an argument out of it just for the sake of making an argument out of it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, you know, my thing.
You muted.
Oh, my bad. I know you probably didn't see all of my Crows on the Strawman presentation. I did a part 1 and part 2.
Yeah, I looked at it, man. It was great. I mean, you basically just covered everything.
Yeah, well, I tried, but remember, it's just a sample from part 2 of the minority part that I'm doing. Which, by the way, I don't know why Jabari didn't watch part 1, which I'm very disappointed by. Because he would have known that he was dealing with a different type of person, right? But you know, ingeniously, he only was dealing with one lecture I did in 2014. I put out, man, I think maybe about 40 lectures since then, and he only seen one. So you know that's not a good way to gauge your opponent if that's the only thing about them that you know about, and you keep making your argument centered on a lecture that I did that was not designed to be scholarly, but designed to bring a conversation of unity between two communities. And that reference was designed to do that. Science that I use, the archaeology that I use, the books that I use, it wasn't designed to say, hey, here's my scholarship and this is what I present to academia. No, it's like, hey, here's some information so we can have this discussion, put it on the table so we can come together as a community and have constructive builds. So he took it out of context and he was trying to force me to defend it when I'm telling him that is not my scholarship. He didn't get that part.
Oh, hold on. Let me put this into the sand right quick. The whole, yeah, Divine, you're a smooth talker, but you're secretly anti-African. But you're just shrouding it in all of these big words and stuff. Like that kind of thing drives me crazy. Where, you know, they were doing that kind of thing where he kept saying you're anti-African or something, but you just know how to. You're better. You're more of a diplomat. You're more elegant in how you put it, but you're saying the same thing. I'm like,
that's what he's saying, and I'm like, how could you say that if I just told you in my rebuttals that I'm not, and I give you references to my works to validate that. So it's, you know, it's very sad because even in my part 1 of Pro Man's on a Straw Man, I actually broke down the curse of Canaan situation, and I explained that, right? Where I go into the Zondervan Bible Dictionary.
Now hold on, I'm sorry, bro. That right there is okay. Let's be logical. You're logical. I think everybody on this panel is logical. I think everybody listening is logical. God cursed Asiatics, not Africans. Canaan, those are Asiatics. So how do you
according to the ancient Egyptians as well? Yeah, they were considered Asiatics.
Right. So how do you say God cursed Africans? And they say, well, hey, that's what we're going to say. The Bible is anti-African. When it says right there, he cursed Asiatics. And when you look at the Old Testament, no other group of people gets more curses and famine and all these kind of other stuff more so than Asiatics.
Exactly. And even from the worldview of the text, the own people who authored the text
are beat up way more than, listen, I could make
crazy.
a serious argument.
That's crazy, man.
Yahweh is anti-Israelite more so than anti-African.
Exactly.
I can make a way better argument for that.
Exactly. So his thing was, he was trying to project me in a negative light before even getting to present my premise to the audience by saying he's anti-African, and therefore their minds will shut down and they will be appalled by anything I present, because that's the worldview that they assume that I take. Somebody just dropped off. So what I wanted to do was showcase, which I did, that I'm not anti-African, and a lot of things that he was using, like the 600,000 men that left out. I did a whole lecture on that, and I told him in advance. I said, I don't subscribe to that. So you cannot make these arguments, these strawman arguments, for people who make arguments in my community, and they're not me. You're not debating them. They're not here to defend their worldview. You're here to debate me. So by saying I'm anti-African, that's not my worldview, you lose right there. By saying this 600,000, you lose right there. By saying 8th century, and I'm telling you, no, there's evidence for more, you lose right there, because you're trying to debate somebody that's not me to make it easier, strawman, to make it easier for you to pick at. And I kept telling him, I said, listen, if you do that, if people who are really critical of this, they'll see that I've extinguished all the arguments you tried to flow with through the entire debate. You understand what I'm saying? And then when I'm trying to talk logically or rational to you about a cultural paradigm that was created by a group of people that we see trends in other comparative cultures, you want to bring me back to the Bible. And I'm like, but you just been telling me that I can't deal with corrective history, and all he wants to do is talk to you. This is what he said. All he wants to do is talk to you about Noah, and all he wants to talk to you about Adam and Eve and Ham, Shem, and Japheth. That's all he wants to talk to you about. He don't want to go into the real history of these people, but when I do, you don't want to have that discussion.
Like, even with the Noah, like, okay, this was driving me crazy about the Noah thing, and you explained it to him at least 3 or 4 times. It's like, it's one thing to say that Noah went on a boat with his family, had 2 in every animal on the boat, and the whole world was flooded. And it's another thing to say that the Noah story is based off a real flood. Okay? Yep. So if you're saying Noah is based off a real flood, then that flood itself would be historical. Exactly. But what he kept doing is that, well, if you're saying the flood is historical, then you're saying Noah is historical. And we have Noah. It's like he couldn't.
He couldn't. It's like being conveyed to him. It was like going over his head purposely, because he didn't like my answer. It was not the answer that he designed to beat up. So it's like, no, I got to get him back into the narrative. That's how I can win. Come on, I got to get him back into the narrative. And I'm like, bro, that's not how scholars deal. Like, I don't have to be subjective with my cultural subscription in order for me to prove a point. I can be very objective and unbiased towards what I believe in or what I subscribe to present it to you in a light where you can at least acknowledge what is being presented to you, even if you don't agree with it. But apparently this is coming from somebody who said they have a master's degree in history from Cornell University and say that they are a master debater and all this other stuff. And I would think that they would.
I'm telling you, man, I'm going to go, listen, I'm not going to say he's a liar. I'm not going to call him these kind of things, but
it's divisive. Can I be heard at least? I mean,
go ahead, bro.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Shalom to the panel. What's up, brother Divine? What's up, my brother?
Shalom,
panel. But like, I guess, like, to add to it, the most frustrating thing that kind of wrap it up, and one thought for me was how they would say, blase blah, Canaan was a colony of Egypt, but when our Bible says that Canaan would be subjected to his brothers, then it's a problem. You know, I mean, something as simple as that. I mean, it was just kind of crazy how they always was trying to divert and not really trying to get to the heart of the matter. So, you know, I know it was pretty frustrating for you.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing that it did was it caused me to go on a tangent in order to prove my point. And that's when I started bringing out primaries from ancient Kemet and showing them in those primaries that, yo, if you saying that the Israelites was anti-African because they was waging war with these Canaanites, I say, what you got to say about the ancient Kemetic Nasubites? They waging whole-scale wars, given the authority by their patron deity Amun-Ra. How do you address that? How do you address that? They never touched on that. They never touched. You know why? Because now they got to deal with the ugly and they got to respond to it on the fly because they're not used to an Israelite bringing out primaries from ancient Kemet. They're not used to that. So being that they're not used to that approach, he doesn't have a formally constructed line of argumentation to defend against that because he's not prepared for those coming his way. All he could do is just shake his head at it. But you can't. And I told him, I said, let's go into the language. I told him, let's go into the language because I know some Medjugorje. I said, yo, let's go into the language. And therefore, if I'm wrong, show it to me. He never wanted to do that. He avoided it the whole time. He never wanted to go into the language with me. Never. You know what I mean? And that's sad that I'm an Israelite. I'm saying let's go into the Medjugorje. He's avoiding it. That's crazy.
It's also little stuff like this, right? So I deal with people like from Kemet. Like I got good friends with some Kemet folk, right? Like like the brother Kansu. You know Kansu, right?
Yeah, of course. You know I know. Wow.
So I was talking to Kansu about this. I'm like, the brother said he was a Kemetic priest, Brother Jabari. So the first thing I'm thinking about is, so who initiated you? And what, you know what I'm saying? What is, where
the rules are so loose. It's
is the council of Kemetic priests?
Yeah.
Like, where is this at? Because what it is you could call yourself a Kemetic priest, but you're really an African American attempting to emulate what you think a Kemetic priest was like.
Exactly. And you know,
that's what's happening.
That's his issue with Brother Reggie. Brother Reggie does not recognize that, such as a lot of other people in the community don't recognize his priesthood. And Reggie says everything that he does is pseudo. There's no evidence for it in the Kemetic text. That's what Reggie says. So, like, for example, the eschatological text called the Prayer Emheru, that's talking about is a series of spells designed to get you to Amduat, so you can make it to the field of heavenly reeds, right? And he's saying that, oh, all of this was just ceremonies that they did while they was alive. I'm like, what? So they were doing all of these ceremonies while they was alive? Listen,
and I'll see, and the reason, and here's the difference between
wait, let me say this real quick, Alvin.
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
Those ceremonies are part of his initiation process to get people into his priesthood. I don't know what that's like in the culture.
Like, check this out. Like even and even to be fair and objective, it would be difficult to even call yourself a Hebrew priest today, being that we don't have a temple. You know, you would need the temple in the land in order to fully do the priesthood thing with the sacrifices and all that kind of stuff. So even from our own paradigm, you know, just going around saying you're a Levitical priest and you're in the priesthood without the temple. Now we could take it to where we're now in the order of Melchizedek, right? And you know, we follow the law, and we could be more in the broader sense of priest, but that would just be in the more broader sense. So when I see somebody saying they're a Kemetic priest, I'm like, okay, that's fine, but you're simply doing what you think they were doing.
Exactly.
Okay.
But nothing to substantiate it. But let me open up the floor to somebody else who wants to speak. I'm gonna mute you for a second. It's all about, let me mute you. Does anybody else have any input or feedback who's on the panel? Anybody else on the panel that wants to say something? You can unmute yourself. Anybody on the panel?
Hello.
Okay. Yeah, shalom, Makoti.
Okay. No, my thing is like how they'll try to say, you know, it's not real or it's false. And then once you bring forth the, you know, proof behind it, then it's plagiarism. It was stolen from African history or whatever. So if it was stolen, then why can't we get on the same page? As far as like, I have a friend, he's Kemet. or Egyptian, whatever his belief is. But he always he say the laws came from Mayet. Okay, so if we have some of the same beliefs, or why can't we come together on this then? Why can't we find a common ground and come together? Why does it have to be, oh, we did it first or we did it first? That's
Yeah,
my thing.
it's pride. And even now I'm gonna speak a little Latin for y'all right now. A lot of these brothers are committing the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy, which is basically a causation versus correlation thing, where it's like, because this thing came first, therefore the thing that came after it was caused by it. That's a fallacy, because you're eliminating any possibility of things happening independent from one another. So if you see a certain set of laws in Kemet, right, that may resemble certain biblical scriptures, and they are written down before biblical text, there you could say there's a correlation there, but to then jump to the conclusion that, well, this is where they got it from because it's older, that's a fallacy. And we also have to remember that just because it was written down first doesn't mean it was first thought up first right there.
Exactly.
It just means that it's the first recorded record of something. We have no idea how old these things go back, orally or verbally. We just know who was the first person to write them down.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they base their entire argument. So even that argument saying that, elements of the Torah came from, the 42 negative confessions. 42 negative confessions is not a codified system of laws, right? This is stuff that the Nasut does when he's in the Amduat, because before he even gets to the weighing of the heart ceremony, he has to come before 42 deities and make a confession to them. That's where these 42 negative confessions come about. But being that there's never a time where, because look, you have a stage where if you make these confessions and these deities say, yes, you're telling the truth, they'll let you pass on to the Aru, or the field of heavenly reeds. But no person who has a prayer in Hebrew actually makes it that far. So some of those entities that they have to make these confessions to vote that they're not telling the truth. And what happens is they get sent down to Tahuti and Ampu, where they get their heart weighed. You understand what I'm saying? So what the Nasut would do is that when they buried in the Nasut, they always put over his heart, because they leave the heart in the body and they fill it with natron, which is a salt to preserve the heart. And they wrap the person in linen, and they fill the linen with resin, right? This is to preserve the body. And what they do is that they place a heart scarab, amulet type device over the heart. And they have something written on it that says, that's telling the heart, do not testify against me. Because when this Nasut goes before these entities that he has to make these negative confession towards, that heart is not his heart, is being prevented from testifying against him for things that he actually did that he's not telling the truth about. So he's not even upholding Ma'at, to be honest. He's really trying to be deceptive even going before these entities, right? So I say this to say that when you actually go into, hold on, I'm just going to mute you real quick. When you actually go into their text in regards to how these things were done, most of the Nasuts had these things written on their wall reliefs, which means that after they died, their tombs were sealed. So who had access to go into these sealed tombs? Number one. Number two, now what they started to do was later on create these coffin texts, because now the people was feeling a certain kind of way that they wasn't getting eternal life. So now it's like, okay, now if you can afford these coffins with these texts on it, these spells on it, now we can also give you eternal life. And you know how much of the populace that was? About 2%. So that means 90 to 98% of those people did not get eternal life and did not have access. Did not have access to those spells. Go ahead, Alvin.
Yeah, see, these are the points that need to be brought out. Now, oh man, I forgot what I was going to say. Okay, so when we're looking at Kemet, right, and we're looking at the biblical scriptures, there is a very stark contrast when it comes to ideologies. Okay, so when you look at the scriptures, it is very immaterial, where everything in earth is vanity. You can't bring this stuff with you to the afterlife. You know, placing great importance on things of this world is insignificant. Money, there's even a money demon, mammon, like, so it's very immaterial, right? Now, when you contrast that to Kemet, they love the material world so much that there's an attempt to bring the material world with you into the afterlife, where you're buried with your treasures and with your boats and your chariots. It is a direct opposite philosophical wise. So to say the Bible came from something so opposite wouldn't make a lot of sense. Now, let me tell you where, if you really want to do comparative religions, right? If you really want to compare the biblical scriptures to another region, you got to go to the east, because then when you go into India, when you start looking at these other sects around there, they're also speaking of the immaterial, where it's like the world around you is fake. You know, you really should be working towards the afterlife, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, regional, that will also even make more sense, considering the biblical text is a Near Eastern religion. It's Eastern, you know. There's traces of Africa in there, obviously, if you're right there at the border of Africa, but it's more so Eastern philosophy, you know. And we should, if we're really trying to find correlations and influence when it comes to the biblical text, you will have an easier time looking toward the east than you would like in African religion, because there's very different.
Say this real fast, and you know, I'm not disagreeing with nothing you say, but I kind of look at it like this. I look at it whereas Africa was kind of, you know, humanity was banned from Africa. I feel that the Sahara Desert is what was called that flaming sword. So, you know, I kind of try to stay away from the term Asiatic, you know, or Afro-Asiatic, because when we look at it, it's pretty much like Kushite, and then you have an admixture of Kushite and Shemitic, as well as Mizraim, but more so Kushite. So, you know, that's another thing that I think, you know, I don't know what you ascribe to, but me as a Hebrew Israelite, that's one thing that, you know, I can easily stay away from, because I kind of have a disdain for it, like terms like Afro-Asiatic or Asiatic in that sense. But I definitely agree with what you're saying. It's more of an Eastern, so-called Near Eastern flavor, where it's based on an immaterial as opposed to the vanity, which is another reason why I really can't understand our Kemetic brothers, why they would, you know, gravitate towards something like that, because, you know, it's so many words like another representation of America, you know.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and you know, my thing is, I look at it from as many vantage points as possible and reconstructing a history that is typically viewed from the wrong lens. And it's because most of the research that we ascertain comes from a community that does not have our best interest at heart. So if we're going to claim being Hebrew Israelites, we have to start producing our own formal interpretations based on the available data or we have to put some funding behind doing primary research and uncovering primary things at excavational sites, or be able to put forth unique propositions in the form of theses in the realm of academia that we can all then come behind and subscribe to. And this is very important. Otherwise, our view of what happened is always going to come from the lens of our oppressor, right? Or those who we deem to have stolen our identity. And one thing I can give to the Kemetic community is that they have a head start in that arena with their community. You know, they have a lot of great minds from their community who have done that type of work that they can reference, right? We don't have the same degree and or pedigree of individuals from our community that is doing that same work. So they have a head start on us. And go ahead, Alvin.
I would agree and disagree at the same time, because I would say the people claiming to be Hebrew Israelite that actually are down with the scholarship and are not completely fundamentalists, they don't really get the media attention. You know what I'm saying? They're in these communities, but you know, you're really the only I would say scholar that can deal with outside the religion kind of stuff that I see,
Right.
like on a public forum. You know what I'm saying?
Which is a good segue question for you, Brother Divine. I mean, do you feel like it's some type of, like, the cards are stacked against you in some type of way when you go to that type of platform? I mean, it's like, it seems like all of the only people they question are like camp brothers, and you know, no disrespect to them, but it's kind of real easy to academically or biblically beat them. So like when Sonetta and these type of, you know, platforms continue to push these type of, you know, ideologies, I mean, do you think it's like, you know, they do that purposely because they don't want the true information to get out?
Well, what I'll say is that, you know, there's always a challenge that I'm faced with when I get on that platform. And the reason why is because it's etched in the minds of, you know, Sonetta, or not really Sonetta, because Sonetta, he knows the type of scholarship that I bring, but a lot of the people that he has on those platforms, they tend to ignore that I just represent many people in our community that have this type of angle. The problem is the more that they are in acquiescence to the scholarship I present, the less they have to inflate their arguments that they've created to corrode our culture, right, and our history. So if you've built a platform of speakers who have invested in trying to pick apart the Bible as their first stage of consciousness, then the problem with that becomes when a person starts to bring objective scholarship that substantiates a lot of the claims, maybe not all of them, but a lot of the claims, then you have to go back to the drawing board. You know, you got to go back and reinvent the wheel. And what that will do is that if you've produced any work that is in opposition to that, it deals a fatal blow, because now you got to admit, hey, you know, I was wrong about this. I was wrong about that. Even though I don't subscribe to it, let me be more objective in viewing it or in how I portray it, right? Because new information has been brought to my attention. And this is something that they're not equipped to do at this point.
And here's the thing. Now, I hate saying this, but when I look at the white people, the white scholars, right? The white atheist scholars, when they talk about the Bible, there's not this level of venom towards it that you might see with, you know, the Sonnettaites, right? Where you'll take somebody like Richard Carrier, right? He doesn't even believe Jesus exists, but how he talks about it is he doesn't describe the people as stupid or dumb. He's saying, hey, listen, these guys are creating these as allegorical cold word stuff, and they're using it this way, blah, 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 right? And that's the scholars that are really into scholarship are not looking to debunk. They're looking to be skeptics. And I think there's a difference between a skeptic and a debunker, where a skeptic is, okay, I'm not sure I believe that right now. Let me dig a little deeper. Let me get some more research to see if something can pop up to convince me. Because right now, I'm not down with it. As opposed to a debunker, hey, I know this is wrong, and I'm going to attempt to find ways to prove that it's wrong. I think the approach is very, yeah, it's a very different approach. But the first thing I would try to teach Black people is nuance. For some reason, Black people in America cannot grasp the idea of nuance, where something may not be completely wrong and something may not be completely right. With us, it has to be either 100% right or 100% wrong with no gray area at any time. When the majority of time, when you're dealing in history,
exactly,
the majority of the time is going to be gray. Exactly. The overwhelming majority of the time.
Especially when you deal with social sciences and humanities, where new evidence comes about all the time. You know, so that's why even when scholars present their arguments, they always leave room for error, which is a margin of room for error. Matter of fact, when I presented the Bible on Earth in my presentation, I just went to the preface, and they told you in the preface that it's up to you to judge whether or not that they're rendering their conclusions based on the evidence. They didn't say this is the definitive work and a general consensus on this subject matter. They don't say that, you know what I'm saying? But yet people will take that book and use it as if it is the final authority, when the book itself does not even proclaim that. And
Finkelstein openly admits he's a minimalist. He openly admits he's a minimalist. Finkelstein does. He doesn't try to hide it and trick people. He says, no, I am a minimalist.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to open up the floor to other people who want to speak. Before I do, I see Brother Wujawu is in here with us. Brother Wujawu, you would like to say a few words?
Well, first, let me greet everybody. You know, peace to the panel. I'm not familiar with everybody on the panel. I'm familiar with Alvin. Alvin is an old time hangout.
Oh, what
buddy.
up, Wujawu? I didn't even see you on here. What up, man?
Yeah, Hotep. So I just want to say peace to all the panel members. I'm not familiar with everybody. I just happen to be multitasking online and saw that you all were still live, and I clicked and listened a little bit, and then I saw the link, so I just came in. I do want to make a comment about something that was said earlier, and like I said, I didn't listen to the whole show. It looked like you all were on for quite a while, a long while actually. So I'm totally ignorant of what was going on before, but I did catch maybe the last 20 minutes or so, including what I heard while I was in here. So I don't know if you all addressed this, but I heard that you all mentioned comedics and the fact that there are people who make these comparisons between Egypt and the Abrahamic traditions, the Bible in Egypt, and how they say plagiarism. They'll say that the Bible plagiarized this, plagiarized that. I don't subscribe to that myself, and I know a lot of people who don't, but there are people who do, and they'll say that. And so I think that that's wrong to do, because like pretty much kind of what Alvin was saying, that there's a margin. Well, earlier you were saying, maybe an instance of not, you said correlation, but it may not one being the cause of the other, and things like that, a direct cause. So those people need to really show that. And so I stay away from, this being plagiarized from this or whatnot. And I don't even think that that's important, because even if that's the case, what are the implications of it? So I think people harper on the fact that if it was or not, and not really looking past it. Let's say, everybody agrees to say, okay, yeah, it was plagiarized. Now what? Then I think people will be at a loss, because they haven't really thought that far. So I don't really subscribe to that. But what I wanted to make a comment about is that there's a difference between scholars, and we have to be careful with these terms that people either are adopting for themselves or that people are giving to people without incorrectly. They're becoming misnomers, because real scholars understand the idea of, the concept of not leaving any stone unturned. So like if you're walking up on a puzzle or a mystery, like a crime scene investigator or whatever the case is, if there's like hundreds of stones that you have to turn over, but you only turn over, let's say 10 out of 100, and then you base your conclusion on turning over those 10, you're only going to see a certain picture. And you could be right. Statistically, you could be right about your conclusion just based on those 10 turned over stones. But then as time goes on, as you uncover or turn over all of the other stones, you may have to come back and revisit your first conclusion based on the 10 stones. So real scholars understand this concept of context, conclusionary context. And this is why, as Divine, as you said, when new information or new data becomes available, real scholars understand their limitations and their strengths and weaknesses. And they understand when new data is available, they have to revisit their older conclusions, because now you have a bigger picture of the context of what you're working with. And I don't see a lot of people doing that. So we have to, not saying any of you all, but in a community at large, we have to be careful of labeling people scholars or labeling people different titles who don't behave and exercise scholarship, or even the mentality and the psychology of a scholar or a teacher, and so on and so forth. So I think some people get bad raps. People who actually do that, they get bad raps because of the people who don't do it, and then if we're sharing these platforms, then we all get pushed in the same bucket, So I just want to make a comment that, we kind of got to be careful with that.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for that.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yeah.
Just real quick. And like Wujao said, a lot of time the scholars create safety nets for themselves. So like, let's say, for instance, Joseph, you'll hear a scholar say, as of today, there's not enough evidence to confirm a historicity of Joseph. Now, when he says that, he actually created a safety net for himself, because he just didn't come out and say Joseph doesn't exist, it's just a fairy tale, right? Because if he did that, then he created I told you so moment, where let's say evidence does come out that he did exist. Now he might have egg on his face. But if he makes the first statement, as of today, with the evidence we have available, we can't confirm historicity. If evidence then comes later, then he can be like, well, hey, at that time, there wasn't enough evidence. But now that there is, okay, there we go. So then that eliminates the I told you so moment, and he won't have a bias, because then it'd be like, hey, I said it back then, we didn't have enough, now we do, boom. So it actually helps your credibility to phrase certain things in that way.
And that's why scientists, just real quick, that's why science itself is evidence-based. So a real scientist will say, they're careful with their nomenclature and, the terms and everything. They will say there's not enough evidence for this or that, or they'll say no evidence exists for this or that. They won't say simply blanket subjective expressions. Scientists try their best to use more objective expressions of things. So instead of saying this is hot or this is cold, they'll just give you the degrees in Fahrenheit.
Exactly.
And then that kind of sets the more objective expression. So like you said, they'll just say there's no evidence for Joseph's existence, and then that opens the door for evidence to pop up later, and then you have to shuffle and readjust your conclusions. So that's what I'm saying. So science, we have to be more scientific based.
And I agree with that, because even when I started, when I had a debate with Jabari, I said I'm a student first and I teach last, because as a student, you're ever learning. You never know what you may come across that may sway you either way. And in coming into debate, you're never a loser if you're there to learn, right? And this is what I wanted to put on the table even before we began our discourse. So that way it's clear to the audience that I don't have a motive here, right? I've been placed on the defensive, and that's what I was playing for most of the night. but I would have liked to have gotten into a way where we can talk about unity in regards to the cultures. Now, one thing I would say, and since Wujaru was on the line, Wujaru is an expert in the Medu Neter, right? And I always give him his props on that because I've acknowledged his work. I've seen his work. I've seen him demonstrate his work. So he's a good go-to person in regards to the Medu Neter, right? The problem I had was when Jabari was making a lot of claims, I asked him, can we go back to the literature and can you validate that? And he was avoiding it. He was avoiding going to the literature because that wasn't a strength of his, number one. But number two, how can you allow your opponent who doesn't subscribe to your worldview say, let's go into the language and build on the language? And you say, well, that's not the point. That looks very bad, right? Even though his wife was there and she can read the Medu Neter, he is not as adept as her, so he didn't want to deal in that way and make himself look bad. But if you're coming to a debate with somebody who's studying that and they're learning it and they're growing it and they want to give you an opportunity, since that's your worldview, to teach it to them, right? Then you should take advantage of that opportunity. And when you don't, you let your community down. Because now you're going to a debate and they're expecting you to be an expert because you told around your degree and everything like that. But you can't even do something simple as read a glyph for somebody to validate your point. Go ahead, Alvin. Or Wujaru. You can speak on that, Wujaru.
Yeah, go ahead, Wujaru.
All right, yeah, because you laying the sauce on a little thick. I don't refer to myself as an expert, but I the title I do accept and hold high is a teacher. I do teach the language.
At the very least, Wujaru, I can bring up some Medu Neter and you can tell me what it's saying on there. That's pretty.
Oh yeah, I'm just saying. But I'm just saying. I'm kind of hard on these titles, so I don't I don't call myself a scholar because I haven't expanded the field that I'm in. Just yet. I wouldn't consider myself a scholar yet. But what I did want to say was about the what you just said about the language and everything. I think that everybody should take time out to learn the language, the language of whatever culture or society that they're focused on and studying. So I don't see an issue. But the thing is about that is that people got to be careful. And I'm not sure, like I said, I don't know what you all discussed beforehand, but even among the followers of Abrahamic traditions, and I say that in a general way because we have Muslims, we have Hebrews, and there's so many Hebrew camps that I don't want to offend any one particular camp. So I just say Abrahamic traditions as my, generic way of saying it. But even in that, whatever text that people are subscribing to, be it the Quran or the Bible, or people who split it and say New Testament versus Old Testament or whatever, I think that people have to understand in history or in ancient times, the technology that we call today figurative expressions, figurative language. Like we take it for granted today because we have metaphors, simile, allegories, and so on and so forth. But back then, those were important pieces of technology that they used in order to create discourse and mnemonic devices to pass on information
and memory
and social memory and narratives and all
right.
types of stuff. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Mnemonic devices in terms of the memory. So in order to keep the body of knowledge in the memory of the people, because you're coming from a total oral world into a literary world, starting in small pockets of the planet. So basically the entire population was oral, and then this technology of writing comes about. So there had to be ways to keep this body of knowledge. Like, just for a quick example, imagine the first person or the first group of people that experimentally tried out different foods. They had no idea what food would kill them and what food would keep them healthy, or even when they get sick, whatever the case is. So in order to do that experimentation over lifetimes or generations, they had to have a way of storing that knowledge, so the next generation didn't have to start from scratch. And then you got a whole bunch of people testing and dying and things like that. So they had to create these devices to save the information and pass it on. So they created figurative ways of creating these narratives, scientifically based narratives we call myths, and so on and so forth. So if you don't know the realities that are behind that figurative expression, then you're running the risk of going way off trajectory in your interpretations of whatever it is you think the people are saying. This applies to people who deal with Kemet, people who deal with the Bible, people who deal with the Quran, Muslim, you know, all around the world, really. So I think that people really need to take some time out and really try to learn the language and learn the culture and take in all the tools that you can in order to get back to the realities behind this figurative language. Because the Bible itself, I don't know how you all feel in terms of, do you take it literal or you understand the allegory and the figurative aspects of it? But in the figurative aspects of it, it's the realities behind those symbolisms and allegories and metaphors. So
we were just talking about that.
Okay, so what's being done to recover those realities? Because, like, you know, I grew up, y'all don't know this, but I used to be a prison minister. I used to go in prison and actually you know, administer the word. So you know, I have a thorough Christian, you know, background and everything. But what I know, in being in the church, I can go to a different, you know, service, and I see people that can take the same passage in the Bible and apply it to just about any life situation, because, you know, the way that they are interpreting it, they could just overlay it on, you know, numerous life situations or whatever the case is. But then there's the intended meaning, like the intended reality behind, you know, the figurative ways that certain things are written. So I'm just asking, I guess, or encouraging people to really, really soak in the culture, soak in the language as much as possible to recover those realities so that you could reset your trajectory on the intended meanings behind everything. Because, you know, so we can get away with people putting spins on it and interpreting it their way. And now you got two people saying opposite things, and they're both being correct, so to speak, within their own congregations or, you know, groups and stuff. So, you know, I just encourage that.
So I appreciate your input on that, Ujao. And I wanted to bring something up as well, to kind of like tofu back on that. But you know, and one of the things that Jabari, one of the claims he made was making a mention of the Exodus account. And according to the Exodus account, he said 600,000 men left out, which would equal to 2.5 million women and children. And I had told him previously, even before we had this debate, I said, I don't subscribe to that. And I even explained to him my methodology and gave him a reference to a video that I did on that, right? And this is based on being able to better interpret the text. And in light of the other historical data, archaeological data, statistical data. And that's what I was showcasing when I was doing a portion on methodology that I showed a couple of slides from the social sciences methodology from the University of Southern California. And they have a great to the point way of how to present your methodology, right? So in that actual lecture that I did, that's exactly what I did. I first looked at statistically how many people from whatever records that we have actually lived in ancient Kemet. You know, and I said, you know, at that time where the proposition is made that this so-called Exodus occurred, you know, you had about 3 to maybe 3.5 million, the most people living along the Nile, from the earliest cataract that borders Taseti all the way towards the Nile Delta. So if you have about 3 million people that live in the Nile during that time, 3.5 million people, and you're saying 2.5 million people left out, that does not line up. That's a big issue, a huge issue. Because any sites that we look at in the Nile Delta did not sustain that many people in one space of time. So my triangulation of the data is looking at that and say, hey, you know, if this event did occur, right, it wasn't by no 2.5 million people walking out. That just did not happen. So that is one of the first ways that I started re-examining a particular passage to say, hey, you know, this must be based on some kind of exaggeration or literary device that's designed to put more emphasis on the magnitude of a patron deity and delivering people, but it's not really centered in the language itself unless it's being misinterpreted. And that was my conclusion, is that they didn't interpret it properly. So I went back to the language and I parsed it. And after looking at it, conjugating and say, hey, you know, they missed something, you know, because this is not consistent when we look at it in other areas of the text. So I had to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, can this be better translated, right? So that's what I did. So I'm glad Wujah was on here, because at least he gets to hear some of this, and he can go back and watch the video I did on it called revisiting Exodus 12:37, how many Israelites actually exit out of Egypt, where I look at the statistical data in regards to ancient Kemet. And from there, I work my way up, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm looking at any kind of exogenous data to substantiate a claim that I make and be able to showcase my methodology behind it, you know, because the question is going to be, you know, in the realm of epistemology, how do you know what you know? Is it a presupposition? Are you assuming this because you was taught that you was told this, or did you actually do the experiment yourself on the available information to derive this conclusion? You know what I'm saying? So, and I'll give you an example since we're still there. I know you want to say something real quick, Alvin. I'll let you say it real quick.
No, go ahead, bro. Go ahead, teach.
So I'm gonna show this screen here, and let me know if y'all can see the screen. Can y'all see my screen? Can y'all see my screen?
Yeah, you good. I can see it.
Hold on. Can you see it? Oh no. Let me try this. Let me do. All right. So let me know if y'all can see the screen.
Yeah, we see it.
You see it? All right. So can you see the screen? Are you looking at the screen as well, Wujah?
Yeah, I can see it. Yep.
All right. So when it comes to morphology and reading a text, you can tell how it's structured, right? So if you look here, you see where it says, then the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children, right? Now, if we were to not even look at the English, but if I was to read the Hebrew here, right, it starts with Va, Bene, and then it goes on to Yisrael, and then it goes on to the rest of it. This is not proper Hebrew morphology. And the reason for that is because when we're looking at the text of how it begins, it starts first with the action, which is here, journeyed. The verb starts first, not the noun, the verb. So if somebody was reading this and they did not know morphology in regards to Hebrew, they would be reading this incorrectly. And somebody who knew Hebrew would be like, wait, hold on, what are you saying? That sounds like English morphology. It's not, or syntax. It's not making any sense. So I say that to say that when I do these type of studies, you know, I get this deep into my studies so that way I can verify any kind of hypothesis that I come up with before I engage in a particular thesis in order for it to be my conclusion, because I use inductive analytical methods in order to do so. So I'm not deducing from an original point of origin that was either presuppositional or something that I've gravitated towards, but I work from the ground up to say, what is the available data in regards to the subject matter, and take that data and be able to synthesize it and create an algorithm to input the data and have it output and yield results, see what the results are, and try to make sense out of it, right? So one of those things that I did was I went to go after, like I said, after I looked at the statistical record in ancient Kemet and saw how many people lived there, and I kept track of the various Shashu peoples that was coming in and out of ancient Kemet. In the northern and the eastern delta, there was an X amount of tribes of people, groups of people that would leave in and out. And when you're able to look at this data, you're able to tell, you know, approximately, or give you a gauge to how many people are actually leaving and coming in, or able to sustain themselves in that type of environment, leaving in and coming out. You know what I'm saying? So 600,000 to 2.5 million people is very difficult for them to sustain themselves in that type of environment with that many people and that many resources that is not as abundant, right? So we have to consider these things before we go back and teach from a realm of belief. You know, we have to be able to actually look to see if there's any evidence that can help better substantiate this claim that we're making. So when we go through the language here, And if let's say we was reading it in regular morphology, it would start first with the journey. So it would say, Yisu Bene Yisrael Rameses or Ramses Sukkota Keses Meot Elet Ragli Hag Gebarim Labad Mitaf or Mitaf, right? Depending upon if we're using a plosive with it or a frictive. So anyway, that's how it would read in standard morphology in regards to Hebrew. The problematic word here that we have to look at is this word here for 1,000, right? So this word here is rendered for 1,000. And the problem with that is that it is not consistent with the rest of the text in regards to the usage of that term being aptly applied to 1,000, right? It's not consistent. So it should not read 1,000 when we start to look at it based on culture. So culture, this word here, the first word in Hebrew is aleph, and aleph is representative of an ox, right? And then it can have other figurative or allegorical type of meanings to it or attributes to it. But we're looking at something that deals with an ox, right? That's what aleph is. So when we look at it from the most concrete, basic version of how we can interpret this, it means an ox head. Or it can be representative of a herd or a kine, K-I-N-E, of oxen. And anytime you deal with pastoralists, because we had Nubian pastoralists, right? Which I showed in my other presentation. We had Asiatic pastoralists. We had even Egyptian pastoralists, for lack of better words. You know what I'm saying? So pastoralism was a trade of ancient times, you know, and this was something that people did. So when you look at these kine or this herd, which becomes a collective noun, the word herd is a collective noun that's representative of a approximate amount of animals that you're herding. You'll be able to look into ancient times, even look today at the Bedouins today that are pastoralists, semi-nomadic pastoralists, and gauge an idea of how many of animals that they typically, on average, looking at the median range, that they actually herd and that they're actually able to sustain within their environment. And when you're able to do this, it better gives you more information to then interject into the passage and say, okay, let's see what's really going on and why they applied this. Now, typically, one person didn't really have 1,000 oxen, or their herd was never really that large, right? Because it's very difficult to maintain that, right? A large family possibly could, but a large family never consisted of 1,000 people. So for every 20 or so pieces of animal that you have within that herd, you need at least one person to watch over, right? To be able to maintain that. And sometimes this is why we have people that get like herd dogs and other things, other techniques that they use when the stock is much bigger than what they're able to handle. So I say this to say, when we're looking at that from that type of angle, and we go back to look in ancient times from burial sites, when you go to excavation reports, right, from Semitic cultures, there are burial sites, and a lot of times we see the amount of animals in certain areas of strata that are buried with the people or buried contemporary with the people, and even certain houses where they were pastoralists in these 4-room houses that had animals, bones around where they lived, and we can tell what type of animal it was, what region the animal came from, what variant of animal it was, how many animals are actually there, and if this person was actually a pastoralist. And then looking at that, you'll never see one family or one person have 1,000 animals in their herd. It was just very difficult to maintain during that time, right? So I say this to say, looking at it from that concrete basic level, we have to say, okay, what is this referring to, right? Is it referring to something in regards to numerical value, or was numerical value added to it later on when we look at textual criticism and the evolution of these manuscripts? Because there's 1,000 manuscripts. I've looked at hundreds of them, right? Not thousands, because I don't have access to all of them. But I've looked at microfeatures of some of these manuscripts, and I've textually compared them to see where the variance is at. And I showed you guys some of that when on my other video where I was comparing the Dead Sea Scrolls with the Masoretic text. So in looking at this, I say, hey, you know, are there other variants of this spelling here, which we do find? And if there are variants, what is the implications behind it, right? So in analyzing that, I say, okay, look, so I looked at statistically in ancient Kemet to see how many people lived there, in the whole Nile from the lowest cataract all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. And then the pocket or region of the Eastern Delta to see how many people actually lived there by looking at the excavations that was done there, right? To gauge how many people were actually sustained in that region. Then I also go into the culture of pastoralists to see how many animals that they can herd at any given time, a family or whatever the case may be. Then I look at language and say, okay, this means Aleph, which means Akset. Then you start to put these pieces together, right? And then you start to get a much broader picture of what's going on here. So with this word that they remember as a numerical value for 1,000, more indigenously should say clan or herd. It should be rendered as a collective noun more so than a numerical value, right? And that's looking at other comparative texts that utilize the same word and the rendering of it. Now, words can take on connotations depending upon its syntax and how it's morphologically written in a particular passage. That can happen. But my objective was to see how stative it was when it is utilized in various other passages that imply the same thing, but it's not rendered the same way, right? So this is,
I just wanted to, if I can, I like what you're saying and doing, because that's exactly what I encourage other people to do, because that's what I meant by people really need to get into the language and the culture and then comparative work, comparative, especially with Kemet, because with that, you have a lot of people dealing with biblical information, and the whole Hebrew, the language is still spoken actively. Several generations use it as the first tongue and stuff like that. With ancient Egypt, it's a different story. So it's even more important for people to do what you're doing and describing and everything. But the reason why I kind of interjected is because I wanted to give you an exact same example in Rodney Kemet, which is the language of Egypt. For the word 1,000 at that, I'm sure you all are all familiar with the offering formula, the Hotep Dinasu offering formula. Yeah. And in that formula, you'll see that that certain things are being asked, and there's usually a list of food items, and it will be preceded by the word ka. And the word ka would literally mean 1,000. But in that text, in that context, it doesn't mean 1,000 of cattle or 1,000 of incense or 1,000 of this or 1,000 of that. It really just simply is a word to denote, a lot, like, plentiful. Just give me a lot of this. Give me a lot of that. Give me a lot of this, a lot of that. And in terms of herd, we have collective nouns in Rodney Kemet. Miminet would be the literal word for cattle, but it's a collective noun. Masha, which is army, which is a collective noun showing a group, group of people.
You also got this thing where I just saw a friend of mine today I haven't seen since high school. I literally told her, I was like, damn, Jake, I ain't seen you in a million years, man. Now, that's in the recorded record. I'm a million years old. So you got that kind of thing too.
Well, that's exactly speaking to what I'm saying is that so see, my solution for all of this, like I said, I see the back and forth between, I even see, Facebook groups, you have the Comedics versus the Hebrew Israelites, and I see it all the time on the different platforms. I see people go back and forth, and I'm kind of solution orientated. So I see the solution is to do what ancient Africans did, back way back in time. Even now, they have an information superhighway. And what they would always encourage people is they had initiatory houses where you grow up and you go through your rites of passages and stuff like that. But then you also get initiated into the higher sciences, so to speak. But then you are also encouraged to become initiated into other houses that are not of your own community. And that way you can exchange these ideas in a more professional way. So like, for example, to solve the problem between the Hebrew Israelites or the people who subscribe to Abrahamic traditions and the people who claim to be Comedics and stuff like that, there should be initiatory institutions in place to where you can cross-pollinate. Like for example, I could take Alvin and initiate him, and he can hear the you know, the raw information, the allegory and the realities behind them simultaneously, so that he won't go off and just speculate, and then we'd be arguing all day long. You can formally become an initiate, and I can walk you through a procedural pedagogy, you know, a whole curriculum of how to, you know, learning. And likewise with the Hebrew, on the Hebrew side, take the people who are claiming to be comedics and walk them through in a whole initiatory setting. That way there's no excuse. But we don't do that.
Exactly.
We don't do that at all. But that's how Africans did. That's how Africans did, and that's how they exchange information, because information was seen as a form of technology. So you exchange this technology between initiation houses.
And what I'll say is that that's excellent example, because if we were to do something similar to that, we'd have less dissension and we have more respect for each other's culture, even though we don't subscribe to it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then this will be the basis of more collective scholarship that we can pull together from the quote unquote Black community, and that our opponents that are in standard or orthodox academia can start to respect our unity in presenting our information, no matter what field of study it is. You know, yeah. And this is what my objective was, to dispel Brother Jabari's view of the lack of scholarship that he's seen in our community, and actually see it from a different angle. But that wasn't the type of debate he was trying to have. He didn't care about that, you know, which was very unfortunate, because, you know, now I had to present my whole presentation, which I did, and people can see my methodology. And then now when I demonstrate it live in real time, people can see the depth that I go in order to interpret something. So that way it can be in light of the other extra biblical data that can help support it and give it weight, and say, hey, you know, as quote unquote African Americans in America, we owe our ancestors a due diligent service to do this reconstructive type of research. So that way we can be taken seriously amongst each other and in the realm of academia.
Well, one of the worst things that are disliked by anybody, I don't care what you subscribe to, is to be misrepresented. Like, you know, imagine if I go around and misrepresenting you, Divine. I'm talking to somebody else about you, but I'm totally misrepresenting you. I'm not accurate about what you stand for or anything. And you get wind of that, you would be, you know, upset about that. So to fix that, we have to cross-pollinate, but in a very, very precise way. And the only way we could do it is to set up these institutions so that people will know what you're going through, because otherwise we'll end up with the same mess. But I just want to give an example of what I mean, kind of similar example what you just gave, Divine, in terms of in Kemet. Earlier and in another broadcast, I saw people mentioning the judgment scene, the Peret and Heru, the Book of the Dead and stuff like that.
Yeah, I seen your video on that as well. You did a very interesting video on that on your channel.
Okay, but now check this out. This is an example of what I mean. Demonstrate or what I mean. You have people who don't focus on the study of the Egyptian language or the culture, but they're peripherally familiar, you know, because Egypt is popular, you know, it's very commercial, and a lot of people romanticize it. So they'll look at the Book of the Dead and they'll come up with their own conclusions, but no real rigor into their investigation and study. But if we had initiation houses set up where people can walk into and be walked through a process of understanding, then that would alleviate that, and vice versa on the Hebrew side, Muslim side, et cetera, et cetera. But for example, people are interpreting the heart. I don't know if you all said it tonight or I heard it earlier, that like people are judged, and then I think Divine, you said the person is being deceitful to don't want to bear witness to themselves. But now, if you understand,
I was just referencing the heart scarab and the purpose of the heart scarab that they were buried with.
Okay, so that's the heart scarab. But now let's look at the heart itself. I heard somebody, I forgot who, and I usually mention names because I don't like to kind of do innuendos or whatever. But somebody said the heart is magnetism and the feather is electricity. And
man, let me tell you, Rujal, I'm gonna let you finish that. You need to look at Sam Harris's breakdown on how he metaphoricalized sardines. He's like, see, the rib cage represents the universe, and like he did the whole, like, go ahead, man. That's one of my.
Well, no, I just want to give a quick example. Like, you know, when people see the judgment scene, the heart, you know, this is where the language is important, and the culture, and understanding comparative languages, comparative linguistics. The heart is not literally the heart. And so, like, there's idioms in the language. So, for example, if I say the phrase wasek ib, because the word heart is ib. If I say wasek ib, the word wasek means to stretch, right? It means to be wide or to stretch. So literally, like, even if I know the language or I'm studying a language and I see a text that says wasek ib, I will literally be correct translating it as wide heart or stretched heart or whatever. But that's not the intended meaning of it, because now you have to deal with the reality behind the metaphoric use of that phrase, even though you literally correct in your translation, but now you have to translate for the reality behind it.
And,
so
and
with
the context of the text and how it's written.
Right. And you have to know the culture. There's so much more you're going to need in order to actually successfully do that, though. And that's why I say we have to set up initiatory systems so that all this stuff can be contained in there. But wasek ib simply means generous, because the idea of widening your heart is to be generous on one end, and another end, it means to be inventive, because the ib means the mind. So if you have a wide mind, it means that you're very creative and inventive. But nobody will pick that up until they actually get in and submerge themselves into the more cultural things in the culture, and you'll be able to understand that. Yeah.
Let me tell you something. What's so interesting about what you just said, I went to like a super hyper Kemetic. Like, you got like Kemet scholars and then super hyper Kemetic, right? And he told me the same thing is like what you're talking about in the heart in the Kemet scriptures is also used the circumcision of the heart in the New Testament, right?
Mm-hmm. So
this dude said, look how stupid the Israelites were. They thought you could circumcise a heart.
Yeah, see, that's
now. See, now I wanted to touch on something you said earlier, and I think this is where I was talking about the gray area, where I don't necessarily think allegory and literal are mutually exclusive all the time, you know, or that one is just 100% completely allegory or 100% completely literal. I'm gonna give an example. Like, for instance, when we look at the story of Abraham, right? You know, as of right now, we don't have any evidence as far as the narrative of the Abraham story goes, as far as like him going, you know, his nephew Lot, Sodom, Gomorrah, all of that stuff. We don't have all of that, but at the same time, within the story describing Canaanites going into Egypt because of a famine, that within itself is historically verified right around the time Abraham supposedly lived. Like, you have papyrus in Egypt complaining about Asiatics spilling into Kemet because their land is like famished or whatever. And that's like right around the time of Abraham. So it's like you have the Abraham story that, you know, one may say that could be figurative or allegorical, whatever you want to say it, you know what I'm saying, depending on what school of thought you come from. But within that story, it is referencing something in reality in history where you have a famine in Canaan around that time, and people are going into Egypt to get food and stuff. So I think it's that gray area that we should be dealing with a lot. And I think Black people don't like dealing in that gray area because it actually requires more study. Or you can't microwave it, like what you would say.
Or it may seem to take away from their ego, because we always want to be right, because we've been oppressed and suppressed for so long, and our voices have been minimized, that the moment we do get a platform to bring forth our voice, we want to be the head honcho. We want to be the final authority on things. And in doing so, we lose the essence of humility that we can utilize or use as a vehicle to navigate to get to even greater heights. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I can have somebody like Ujjawa come in here and allow him to speak, because I know the brother's not divisive. I know he's as objective as he can be. And I know that he is good in the craft that he does. And he can sit amongst us and have a discussion with somebody with a totally different worldview and not bring any derision, you know? And
but see, the only reason that's possible is because everybody on the panel is comfortable with dealing in the gray. Exactly. But if somebody is completely in the black and somebody is completely in the white, you're going to have a clash of the titans.
Exactly. And that is what we have to minimize. And that's what my objective is, because I told people I have zero tolerance when I do my hangouts. If people are bringing that type of spirit in here, that they have to get booted out. But it's also so that when we talk like this and we're able to expound, people learn. Like, this is a good environment for people to learn objectively, because we have different vantage points in here. So to me, we want to continue to encourage that type of environment for that type of growth, so we can have these type of dialogues, so we can become the de facto standard when people want to engage who are either in opposite communities or people with different worldviews within the same community. You know, all of this yelling, arguing, cursing, fighting, it's not helping anything, and it's bringing us actually back. So just to sum it up, I don't want to be here too long because it's getting kind of late, but I'm going to open the floor to anybody else who may have a question, comment, or make a statement, or want to share something. It could just open right now. You know, again, the major subject matter was the lecture that I gave. And I know it was pretty extensive, especially with the technical difficulties and the intro and outro. But the basis of the data was I was trying to update the brother on information that he has not been privy of, and he chooses not to be privy of, so he can be more objective in his scholarship, so he can deal with the community more objectively and admit areas where he falls short. But anyway, whoever wants to speak, I'll open up the floor to you. You can give your input or ask a question or whatnot.
I have a quick question. So doesn't the story of Joseph, doesn't like Egypt have that same story?
What do you mean when you say that?
Like they have the same story, but like a different name for the character, meaning speaking of him as the ruler, I mean, you know, on the right hand of the king.
Well, they have the vizier, and the vizier is not really it's from an indigenous term, but I could be corrected if I'm wrong. But the vizier was the main administrator to the Nasut BT, right? So he would administer a lot of the work that was actually done was by the vizier and not really the Nasut. So the reason why I'm saying this is because if we see that, for example, the story of Yosef is where, you know, he got sold into bondage by his own brothers. And we have archaeological evidence and historical accounts of Bedouins doing this, right? I made a reference in part one where we see that there were situations where the Egyptians will go into Canaan and they will bring back booty. And a lot of times it was booty handed over to them by the locals, right? So we have a story where he's given into bondage by his brothers, and he's made his way into Kemet. And upon being in Kemet, you know, he works his way up, you know what I'm saying? But one of the things that we have to examine is why, right? So a lot of times the text doesn't give you all of the information. So it's good to see if there's any extra biblical references to expound upon that. But in the realm of Anu, or what we call Heliopolis, you have what's called the great seers that was there, right? So a lot of the priesthood was considered the great seers. When you go to the Egyptian dream perchant, which is an actual scroll where they kept a corpus of dreams, right? How dreams are interpreted, what dreams are written in it. Let me just ask Wujao real quick. Have you seen that perchant, Wujao? Because I have a transcription of it somewhere. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
You have? Okay. So in people who are able to decipher dreams were giving a very prominent position in ancient Kemet, because it meant a lot to them when dreams are interpreted, right? So what this is actually showing us is that there are certain people that are gifted with being able to do certain things. And because certain cultures are superstitious, that gift can be used, or that person who has a gift can exploit their gift to make their way into a particular prominent position for the betterment of their community, their immediate community, their family, or for some other kind of noble cause. So when we say that there's a similar story, I mean, there's a lot of stories of viziers in ancient Kemet. Matter of fact, we have stories of, for example, AI, if I'm saying that right, and Horemheb. Am I saying that right, Ujau? I and Horemheb. Horemheb and I, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were not bloodline descendants, right?
Let me just say,
sure.
I just want to say something real quick, because I know this comes up a lot. I don't know where your echo coming from, but when it comes to pronunciation of ancient Egyptian, you know, everybody that makes an attempt to speak ancient Egyptian. First of all, the language is indigenously called Rani Kemet. But whenever people are pronouncing these words, it's known in academia that these are just a consensus. It's not meant to be taken as if these are the historical accurate pronunciations. So a lot of times when people ask me, how do you correctly say this or correctly say that, I find myself to have to say that. So these are estimates. These are basically just ways
right, because we don't got the vowels.
Exactly. And I appreciate you saying that, Ujau, because it's funny to me, because when I was having that debate with Jabari, he prided himself in correcting me on my pronunciation. And that's what I do sometimes. Sometimes I can be very eloquent, but when it comes to a name, I could get messed up. You know what I'm saying? And that is,
I mean, at best, you know, people try to stay in line with the consonants, but you know, some people will say Hotep, some people say Hetep, some people will say Uja. Like my name, like people don't realize that my name Wuja'u is the same word that people, when they say Unk Uja Seneb, that Uja is my name Wuja'u. It's just the stative form of the verb. He who is prosperous, Wuja'u. You know, but so we try to stay close to the consonant, the skeleton, but you know, the vowels, it's like, okay, you know, it's understood.
Yeah, and I agree. And what I will say to that is, instead of him actually demonstrating that he understands the mechanics of the script, he rather correct me on pronunciation. And I said, let's actually go into the Stella and let's actually translate it, right? Let's show me how you translate it if you're saying that A, B, and C is wrong. And he refused to do so. You know,
and look, I didn't mean to cut you off, but look, the part that really irritated me with the whole sit down is the part where he said, oh, you know what, you're really smart, Divine, you're really good, but I've been doing this longer than you. I'm like, okay, see, I think you hit, see, when he said that, I was like, okay, Divine touched his soul a little bit. Because when people start talking like that and veering off the subject matter, and your credentials is not an argument. That will never be an argument. You saying, if we're talking about the subject matter, you saying you're a PhD or been doing it longer doesn't validate your claim any more than not saying that.
It all has to do with methodology. And when you have appropriate methodology, it supersedes your level of education, because it is a skill to be able to take the right approach. Now, you may need to lean on some references in order to point you how to do that. But once you're able to understand the underlying mechanics of methodology and you aptly apply that to a particular subject matter, then more than likely it'll lead you to an objective conclusion that is indifferent to your presuppositional advance into it. You know what I'm saying? So what I've done is that I've studied various methodologies, and I approach things based on that in order for me to be as objective with my conclusion as possible. And then once I get that conclusion, then I figure out, okay, well, I'm going to do it now. You know what I'm saying? So the thing that I thought was disingenuous from the brother is being able to pride himself in correcting me, which he said in the video with him and Shaka, that then I sit down, correcting me when I said Menet Pata. He said, well, it could be Meren Pata, it could be this, it could be that. I'm like, okay. Anyway, so I was trying to finish my thought, and he interrupted with that because it gives him a higher level of esteem, right? Because he says, well, the brother pronounces certain words, but I see that he's not saying it right. So that goes to show me that he has no real he has not really sat under anybody that knows the language, and that's not true. I have, but they say the same thing to me that Wujawu says, right? They said, listen, you may get tripped up, but as long as you have as long as you can orthographically write it and be able to demonstrate how it flows, then that sometimes that'll be more important than being able to pronunciate the word, right? Because now you get to look at syntax and other things that get involved with graphemes and so forth, and being able to flow logistically with the mindset behind the original authors who scribed the text or the papyrus. So I wanted to get into that field with him, and it's apparent that he needed to shut it down because he's not that astute in it, number one, and number two, for me to do a slightly better job than him after announcing all these credentials would not work well, you know. So anyway, I'm gonna open up the floor. Does anybody else have any other input before we close out? And I hope that everybody answer you, Nabi. I'll do it another time.
Hello.
Yeah.
I want to
Shalom, family. I just want to say thank you to everyone on the panel tonight for all of the comments that they made, and I want to thank you, brother. And I also too wanted to say that earlier tonight, when you were speaking and you was talking about, I believe it was Black Jews Volume 1 and 2.
Yes.
Can you please email me that information, because I live in and around one of the biggest Ashkenazi Jewish communities in New Jersey. And, you know, they see the way that I dress. They see the way that I talk. When Yah does present me the opportunity to talk to them, and they look at me with a disdain, but at the same time, they tell me, I'm so impressed by what you know from archaeology and from history and from Torah and Tanakh. And I'm looking at them like in shock, but I look at them in amazement at the same time too, because I see a lot of things, I witness a lot of things that they do that has nothing to do with the Torah, that has nothing to do with the Tanakh.
Mm-hmm.
And
hey sister, here's another good thing for you.
hello, my brother.
Oh, go. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, sis.
No, I just said hello, my brother.
Oh, hello, sis. Yeah, no, I was saying because you're teaching on a good subject matter. There, you need to get this book, and it's a Karaite Jew. He gives this lecture. It's called Greek Jesus versus Hebrew Yeshua.
Yeah, I have that book as well.
And that he breaks down what you're talking about, where you have these Jewish sects doing things that aren't even in Torah, like the Talmud, the Mishra, and all these other things. And the Karaite Jews don't deal with any of this. And of all people, this he was a Karaite Jew. He was a white guy, but he made a good argument that Yeshua possibly was a Karaite Jew, meaning that he dealt with old Tanakh only. He didn't deal with Torah. He didn't deal with and he puts evidence in that. That'll be a good read.
I would love to say this. I would love to say this. Right. I would love to say this. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like on the Hebrew side of things, it's real simple. You know, we got the King James Bible. What I find is a lot of people haven't really read that book. I know how difficult it could be to read. I believe there's something spiritual behind that, you know, but for the most part, I think both sides need to go more into, you know, the literature that was left behind, you know, and then in our case, you know, I would employ, you know, people that on the Kemetic side to go deep into the scriptures where they understand it somewhat like how we understand it, you know, where you could tell me what's in the book of Malachi or what's in the book of Obadiah, you know what I mean, and things like that. And I would say the same for the Hebrew side, to go into it on the Kemetic side, just the same, you know.
I got a question.
Oh, okay. Hold on. I'm gonna get to you. I'm gonna make sure everybody speaks. I'm gonna get back to my sister Shawnee. So
thank you.
You're welcome, sis. There's a lot of references that you can use, and the brother Alvin brought out Karaite, right? So Kara in Hebrew means to call and to invoke something, right? And you have the rabbinic school of Judaism, right? So the rabbinic school, they have a compilation of the Mishnah and the Gemara, which is compiled in the Talmud. And the Mishnah has to do with the oral Torah that was passed down through the lineage of the Pharisees, who they claim came directly to Aaron from Moshe. And they have compiled it in a series of rulings by the Sanhedrin, right? That's what the Mishnah is. The Gemara is the commentary on those rulings, right? And the Talmud is where it's all codified at, where there's additional writings over time that is compiled into it. So you have the Babylonian Talmud and you have the Jerusalem Talmud or Jerusalem Talmud, right? The more infamous one is the Babylonian Talmud, and a lot of Ashkenazi Jews, your Jewishness is determined based on how much Talmud you know, and actually not as much Torah that you know. And I know
exactly. And that's what I'm sorry, brother, but that's what I'm noticing when I see them. And I have 3 synagogues like right around the corner from where I live at. And I see that. I see exactly what you said. It looks like they practice the Talmud more than they do Torah. And I just look at them in amazement, and they look at me with like such a disdain. Like, wait a minute, why are you dressed modestly? Why do you have that ribbon? You're not a Hebrew. And I know what y'all spoke to my heart by the Ruach HaKodesh.
So what I want to do is I want to equip you to have a more edifying discussion with them. So that way you're coming with a long list of facts that they have to address. And
thank you, brother.
Yeah, of course. When you study elements of the culture, the language, the history, it better equips you to be more confident when you face these individuals, right? Because otherwise, you know, we feel like, man, I know the truth and I know this, and that, but I don't know how to convey it to them, because there are some very unknown variables that we're not privy of that kind of handicaps us from being as astute as we would like to be. Now, I watched your video, the last video you put on your page, your channel, where you mentioned about interfacing with one of them. And I enjoyed it because it sounded like it was action packed, and it was about 7 to 8 minutes.
It was.
Got right to the point. But what I would say is that a sister like you, I would like to give you all the tools that you need to respond to anything that they utilize to try and disenfranchise your claims to the culture. So we could definitely stay in touch. You have my email address, and I'll definitely assist you with that. But can you tell the people your name and your YouTube channel, so if they're interested, they can follow you and subscribe to you as well?
My name is Shawnee, and my YouTube channel is Talk Truth with Shawnee.
Awesome. Now, Wujawu, can you do the same real quick? And I'm going to close out and let everybody else get a chance to speak. Can you tell us who you are and your YouTube channel?
Okay, yeah. Well, my name, people know me as Wujawu. My name is Wujawu Meneb Edi Ma'at, and I am a teacher of Sesh Medu Netcher and Ronnie Kemet. And I've written a textbook as well as a book called Has the Egyptian Hieroglyphic Writing System Been Deciphered? You know, that was a hot topic last year. I wrote that to, combat, that discussion. I also teach. I also have an online class. I teach online at a website, medunetcher.com. That's MDW-NTR.com. And I'm also part of the Amara Squad, as well as the Seshu Mani Medunetcher, which is a group that was formed because of my classes that students and myself have put together. So that's pretty much, where I am. And as far as our channel, I have my our channel, the Seshu Mani Medunetcher channel. We on every Friday and every other Wednesday.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Because I just want people to see that I don't like to take all the glory. I like to help promote other people if I have a voice or platform to do so. So that way people can also patronize them, because that's very important in our community to show that type of unity. Where as a teacher and as a leader, you're not ashamed to lift up other people who teach and the people who lead as well. So
I just want to say one more thing, brother, if I could, because I know you're going to send me the information, but I just wanted to let you know that, the Reformed, or what they say, modest Jewish people, once I converse with them, after about 5 minutes, they don't want to talk to me no more. It's the rabbis. It's the rabbis that are coming after me hard. And they know who I am when I'm walking in the area with my dog.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, and the reason why, because look, I'll say this to you. The reason why is because laymen don't have an agenda invested in conversation. right? But a rabbi does, because he has an entire synagogue where he has people that are coming in his synagogue to learn from him. And if somebody, a layman, gets informed outside of the culture, it becomes taboo. So their objective is to securitize their culture, even though a lot of the laymen in those communities are equally misinformed. And all you were doing was educating them, but they see that as an encroachment upon their cultural paradigm, because they're really strict about that, especially these rabbis. So the best thing to do is that if the rabbi does invite you to a discussion for whatever reason, even though they may hate you, whatever the case may be, the most important thing is deal with them on a fundamental level that they have to agree on. And in doing so, then you can walk them to where you're at. But that's why I said I want to make sure you have the best tools possible, because if you can kind of erase some of that wall up that the layman may have towards us, then it'll make it easier for the rabbis to take what you're saying seriously and have the evidence to validate and substantiate that. And that's what we want to equip you with, so you can be greater at what you're already doing. That's good.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. So, Navi, I see that you probably want to say something, but just give me 1 second. Let me get DeMarcus. DeMarcus, you there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
All right. You want to say something?
Yeah, no, I just want to say, I love your research and the work that you be putting in or whatnot. Like I said, me personally, like I said, I came up out of that, like I said, as far as, I consider, John Henry Clark, the person who, first had me awakened and was able to like start learning about myself or whatnot, since so I done kind of been through all, like I said, all the schools, but like I said, as far as like, cause I was deep into the, the Kemet and the, the Pan-African, the Black nationalism or whatnot. And I just feel like, you just have to, as far as what stuck out to me, and with the, as far as Hebrew Israelite, it's really just the curses, what I'm saying? I know a lot of times, like I said, when I first looked at y'all bait and with the bait, and I looked and I talked to other people that I know Uncle whatnot, I know other brothers, and it's always the historical, and y'all was, trying to cover the historical as far as there not being any real record. But like, like y'all continuously have been saying, it's more information on the scene, and, like a lot of stuff, I was just really able to go on Wikipedia and really just piece it together. Like I'm not the greatest scholar, the greatest, like book reader, but just me going on Wikipedia and, and like, DNA coming out and looking at like a DNA map of Africa and different things of that nature. I was really able to, piece together a lot of things, and the Bible really made more sense, just, based on like you said, is dealing with what's in it. I know a lot of them don't, we're not accepting of it, but when you have to, you can't put your eggs in one basket, and like I said, when you was debating and you was trying to shed your information, a lot of times, like I said, as far as like the hardening of the heart, we have the body's point of view. So I think like a lot of things with the Bible, a lot of times, a lot of it can really be pieced together with, just with Wikipedia, because I was able just to piece things together with Wikipedia. And a lot of what we understand here in America is we understand something that's really a 1900 doctrine, like, coming from like Martin Delaney and Henry Sylvester Williams and, Wilmot Blyton and these different things. If you go back far enough in time, the people of that time wasn't even thinking or even, had that type of thought of a black person or a black consciousness or African people. That wasn't nothing that you find in the world, at a certain point, so it's like a lot of times we just have to, it can't be somebody just getting up there telling you something and you riding with it. It has to, we have to really put things in the proper timeline, like the Egyptians, they were their own people, and it was nations around, that lived amongst them and around them. So a lot of stuff that we understand today, as far as, like I said, the African people and the Black African power, that wasn't that people's thought, you know. So, you know, that to me cancels out certain things, you know. So, you know, like I said, it just everybody has to be able to read and then decipher and then pick out, you know, what best fits us here in the West, you know, because a lot of that, you know, and I love, you know, John Henry Clark to death, and I always thank him for that video he narrated and you know, the Wesley Snipes put together. But, you know, like I said, it's more information on the scene. We have to stay updated, you know. Elijah Muhammad and where he taught, the different people what they taught, they always giving us little pieces. But like I said, I think now, you know, certain things have just really brought us into, you know, being awakened Israelites, just for the simple fact of, like I said, at the end of the day, the whatever history you can say about, you know, Moses not being able to be found or this person not being able to found, at the end of the day, and I had to admit that to myself, because I ducked and dodged the curses of the covenant for 3-4 years, where I was like, nah, you know. But hey, you know, a lot of the curses of the covenant and the what you call it, the condition, the mental condition, and the characteristics that they said that these people would be in this land, you know, at the end, I had to admit that to myself. At the end of the day, it only fit one people, you know, and I think that sometimes that has to be pushed, because I haven't really seen a person, you know, coming with the Israelite knowledge, talking to somebody that's still stuck in the Kemetic thing, really put the curses up there and really show certain things. I haven't really, I don't know if you've done that, but I haven't really seen that pushed, you know, as hard as it, you know, as hard as I feel like it could be pushed, because I feel like that's what kind of like set in my mind, because I knew about, you know, ancient Kemet. I had like the different books and the Metal Netter and the Book of the Dead. I had all the books, you know, they tell you to read, the Miseducation of Negro. But at the end of the day, I was like, well, dang, this is kind of hard to just, you know, to ignore when this is kind of clear, it's crystal clear, and it kind of spells it out so vividly. And at the end of the day, still of years before it happened, you know. So I just wanted to add that, you know, like I said, you know, we waking up to things, and I was in that fully, you know, when that was what I had, you know, known and been taught. But like, so we just have to grow, you know, in the certain things. So that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, DeMarcus. And me and you can definitely chat one-on-one more about that, and you know, be able to edify each other and come to some comradeship, so that way we can stay in further dialogue in regards to that. So are you Facebook friends with me?
No.
Okay. Are you on Facebook? Are you on Facebook?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. Yeah.
All right. So just type in DivineProspect and then just shoot me a message so we can stay in touch and we can build more on that. All right. So I appreciate your input, and I know it's helped a lot of people who are still watching as well, and I appreciate that. So let me get to, I see Alex is on here, but before I let you speak, Alex, somebody asked a quick question in the group. Khalid is Eternal, and he says, do you subscribe to the Kabbalah? No, I don't subscribe to the Kabbalah. I've read the Kabbalah. I'm familiar with some of it. You know, I have not entrenched myself in it, but I'm familiar with the majority of it. I mean, even the Zohar is a book that I have that I've read through, and other sages who speak on the Kabbalistic system of the Jewish paradigm. So I'm familiar with it, but I don't personally subscribe to it, more so because, you know, I can delve in the realm of metaphysics, which the Kabbalah is representative of, but I'm more geared towards like concrete stuff. So I like historical narratives. I like archaeology. I like language. I like a lot of these things more so than the metaphysical aspect of things, which I'm not neglecting or deducing at all. I'm just saying, you know, even though I can delve in that realm, I prefer to stick with the lane that I'm dealing with, because it is of much more interest to me, because it's more concrete. Now, you also asked, and do we know historically who the Hyksos actually were and where they're from? Yes, we do. You have to look at the work of Manfred Bitek. He did excavations at Avaris, and I showed the reference in my Crows on a Strawman Part 1 video, where I showed you the reference for that. If you want that, email me at kingdomharbinger@gmail.com, and I can send you that excavational report, and you can see what they've uncovered in regards to reconstructing the history of the Hyksos. And as well as on my channel, my YouTube channel, we have American Research Center in Egypt 2016. I went to the conference last year, and I spoke with a lot of the world's renowned Egyptologists, and I've also seen exclusive lectures that they've given that is not privy to our community. And I've compiled some of that in a video that's on my YouTube channel that people can go back and watch who's interested in it. But there was somebody that was interviewing there, and she was an undergraduate for a PhD, and she represented University in California, if I'm not mistaken. And she was there to present her dissertation for her PhD, and that was dealing with the Hyksos people. So I interviewed her, and she gives a very good summary of who they are and what the general consensus is as today, and what evidence that we have or artifacts that have been retrieved to reconstruct that history. And you'll see that in the video, me interviewing her in that video, So I don't know. Have you, Wujawu? I don't know if are you still there, Wujawu?
I'm still here.
Yeah. Did you see that video on my channel, American Research Center in Egypt?
Hold up. Is that the one where you were, I think I don't know if I saw the whole thing, but were you talking to someone who was giving a display, and they were talking about the Beni Hassan exhibit?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw. I don't think I saw a lot of it. I mean, all of it, but I did see some of it.
So if you check it out, and in between those interviews that I got with the people I was able to get, it was very busy and hectic there. You'll see some slides that I took pictures of, right? I don't even know if we were supposed to take pictures of them, but anyway, I took pictures of some of the slides from some of the presenters, and I put it in that video. So that way people who are interested in that can go back and examine it, right? Because this is stuff that we're not made privy of in our community. And going there, I'm gonna say this, I didn't even see that many Black people at this conference. I would say I could count on my hands how many Black people was there out of the hundreds of other white Egyptologists or people in that field that was there. And, this is not saying nothing in regards to race, but what it does show is that, all of these bright minds that we have in this community, we should be at any conference where they're discussing things that we subscribe to.
Let me just say something real quick to that, because I deal with the language. That's my thing. I'm writing a grammar book as we speak. Hopefully I'll be finished by the fall. And I'm encouraging everybody to learn the language of Kemet. If you want to focus on Kemet before you try to teach and propose to be an expert on Kemet, you have to know the language. If you're trying to be a priestess or a priest, you have to know the language. But then the kickback that I get is that, what is learning language going to do? How's it going to put money in my pocket, food on my table, and so on and so forth? But yet, like you were saying, at these different conferences and even courses and classes and discussions that I find myself in, there is a very, very low percentage of our quote unquote our people present or even learning. There's a lot more other people that are learning the language and down to the grammar. I mean, these people who can break down the tale of Senuhe and all these other things forwards and backwards. Grammar tell you how the syntax of a sentence, what's relative clauses and all this kind of stuff. But yet on here, you see YouTube, people can't even break down, what a glyph is or the direction that the glyphs are written in.
When you're done, I have to comment on what you
just
said.
I'm done. I just wanted to say that.
You just said something. You just said something that may be one of my biggest pet peeves on these formats, whether it be on Google Hangout, Facebook, whatever, where you have a discussion with somebody about history. They've been debating with you for 5, 8, 9 hours. And when you stump them, they come with listen, what is this doing for Black people though? What is like, oh, all that's cool and that, but how is that helping the black community, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wait a minute, bro. This whole time you've been debating, and now that you're stumped, you like that drives me crazy.
Yeah. So what I'll say to that is that's why I said to myself, any opportunity that I had, because I'm a tentative member of ARCE. So I filled out the application, I paid dues or whatever the case would be. So I'm just waiting on the final confirmation, just like I am of ISSAJ. So I'm joining these organizations so the things that is not made privy to our community can then become standard fare. And I can encourage other people from our community to go to these conferences, be a part of these organizations. So that way we can get what they have and we can be able to internalize it and decipher it for ourselves.
Hey, Divine, does the Jabari, can he read Medu Neter?
Well, he's very basic in Medu Neter from what I was told. His wife can read it. She can read it because I was writing glyphs and everything. She was able to read it.
He read it? You don't know.
I have it. Well, when I wrote some glyphs down, like something very simple as du'at, right, which literally means adoration, but it's also used figuratively to mean the underworld. Even that, something as simple as du'at, you know, I asked them, you know, can you read this, like, you know, so I can make a point. He's like, oh no, that's not important. So then his wife was there, and she said, oh, that says du'at, right? Okay. Like very simply, she just translated it.
Wu Jiao slightly ethered him, and I don't even know if Wu Jiao realized that he just did that.
Oh, what you mean? What you mean?
Wu Jiao accidentally ethered him. How can you be a Kemetic priest and you can't even read the language?
Wow.
Well, let me say this because I don't want, you know, because people
go ahead, clean it up.
Yeah, no. Let me just make a statement because, like I said, I have not watched the debate. You know, I didn't even know it was a debate. I thought you all were exchanging ideas at first.
It was supposed to be, but you know, it's on other platforms. So.
Okay, but now I didn't watch the whole thing. I did see clips of it, and I found it to be very interesting. I just haven't had the time to sit down and watch it from start to finish.
I said it was accident, though. You accidentally ethered.
No, but let me just say I want to say this for the record. This is me. You know, I say this all the time, but I'll say it here. Is that, you know, in Africa, all across the continent, in order for you to be a wisdom keeper or a priest, because remember the word priest simply means a specialist or an expert that has an important job. Mm-hmm. You know, that because it's all kinds of priests, which means it's all kinds of people that have very important jobs. But in order to be that and to qualify that, you have to be entrenched in the culture, because remember, language is the DNA of culture. So you have to know the language, especially today. So look, in hindsight, if you're claiming to be a Kemetic priestess or a priest, you have to be able to understand the language, because that's how the culture is conveyed. That's the storage house of the culture. So if you don't know the language, then you're just a surrogate, a very bad surrogate with the culture. So that's my position. So, but whether Jabari, the brother Jabari, can read it and stuff like that, I believe he can. But I believe, you know, like a lot of people, it may take time, because some of us see it depends on the frequency in which you deal with it, because it's not something that I can go down the street and talk to somebody in Rodney Kemet or write a letter in the glyphs to somebody else and keep it fresh in the forefront of my mind. So you do have people who it will take a while.
So wait a minute. So Ujal, I got to put you on the hot seat a little bit. So
wait. Hold on, Albert. I gotta. let me wrap up the live broadcast. And
yeah. I don't want this to be on live.
Exactly. I'm going to take it off live.
I have to ask him.
I see the brother Alex. He dropped out. 2 other people dropped out, probably because we kept talking. I apologize for that. Next round that I do one of these sessions, I'll definitely allow those people who I saw dropped out an opportunity to speak so that they can share. I see that D Red jumped in. I'm gonna let him and give him a few minutes to speak, and then from there I'm gonna close out, and then we can talk once it's not live anymore. So go ahead, D Red. D Red. He might just be observing. All right, so I'm about to close out. I want to thank the panel for jumping on the live stream and for giving commentary and feedback. I think that this was an excellent showcase of respect and being able to voice our opinions and our dispositions without any attacks. I want to continue to encourage that type of environment when I have more of these live hangouts going forward. Again, this critique was not designed to belittle Brother Jabari, right? Disrespect him in any way, take away from his legacy, his platform, anything like that, because I'm not here to take down or bring down another Black person. We're just expressing our peer review and our critique of his approach and how we viewed it in regards to the debate, and my rebuttals and some of my refutations to it, because the objective is so that we all can learn. You know, I'm here as a student first, I teach second, but the objective is edification for both communities, you know. And if we're not using up-to-date scholarship, our duty is to inform another brother or sister, hey, you know, let's update this, you know, so we can look it over again, so you won't be as biased towards my community, and therefore teach me something so I won't be equally as biased towards your community, and we can have a mutual respect for each other amicably, whether or not we agree with each other or not, right? So I want to thank everybody for joining in. Thank you for watching Pros on a Strawman Part 2. And I'm going to see you guys another time. So with that, I said peace, shalom, and Black Power, family.